Hey everybody, it's attorney Veronica McClendon coming to you all live from North Carolina today. Just at a conference, and I wanted to share something that came to me as I was participating in one of the events talking with someone, and they mentioned that they were surprised to know how many people are walking around and don't have wills or trusts or any kind of estate planning in place. And when they said that, it really stuck with me because it's true. Like, I bet if I were to go into a major city and walk around and ask people that I see as I go throughout the downtown area, do you have a will? Do you have a trust? And if they will take the time to actually talk to me and answer my questions, I'm sure that most people probably would say no. Like, I don't even think, well, I guess statistics say that less than 40% of Americans have any kind of estate planning in place. So I imagine that if I were to go walk around a major city, then there would be no more than 40% of people who say that they actually have a will or a trust in place. And it's probably going to be even less than that. Just if I'm going to like just your any kind of city, just walking around on the streets, I'm sure that even fewer than 40% of people would say that they have a will or a trust in place. And when you think about it, it's kind of crazy because it's like we all are going to die at some point. And considering that we're all going to die at some point, we're all of us who own property need to have some kind of a plan in place for what happens to that property when we die. And it's interesting to me. I'll be interested to see what y'all say. Feel free to put things in the chat to answer this question for me. Just like, why don't people have a will or trust in place? Knowing that they own property, knowing that they will die at some point, and nobody knows when that's going to happen. Why don't more people have a plan in place? Um, I guess thinking about it, even like, what do people think happens if you do die without a will or a trust in place? I don't know if people really think about it. Like, if they own a house and they are not married, they do not have any children, have they ever thought about what happens to my house if I die and I don't have any kind of planning in place? Here in the state of Georgia, well, when I'm in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, then if you die without a will, the court is going to look to your heirs at law to determine who inherits the property that you own at the time of your death. So if you are not married, you don't have children, the court is going to look, well, are your parents still living? If your parents are still living, they're going to inherit your property. If your parents are married, they inherit the property as a married couple. If they are divorced or never were married, then each of your separate parents are going to inherit your property. And I actually have dealt with a case like that where one of the child died and they had no children or spouse of their own, left their property to their parents who had been divorced for many years, remarried, moved on, but now they own property together again. In fact, it turned out in this case it was the house that they lived in when they were married. So now they own this house again together as a not married couple. And one of the people in the couple, or one of the parents, wants to sell the property, or actually in this case they want to keep the property. They want to get the property in their name because of whatever reason that I won't get into today. They believe that they should have ownership of this property. They can't even get the other parent to talk to them. So this child of theirs died, left the house to the two of them, but one of them won't even talk to the other to be able to initiate the process. So that's a case where someone died without a will, there was no plan, and it's causing a lot of trouble for their family members. Family members who didn't really have to talk to each other for many years. Now they have to like figure out how to own property together or how to dispose of property together. So those are some of the like, that's like an example of like practical real life. What happens when someone dies without a will and they don't have a plan? Let's say that someone has children and they die without a will or a trust in place. Their children are minors. They can't inherit property directly from the estate. They have to inherit it through an adult. So maybe a trustee or a custodian, or in some cases, the court has to appoint a conservator to represent the interests of that child. So in that kind of situation, you think about someone has died and they weren't really planning for how to leave property to their minor children. Maybe they just assumed that they wouldn't die prematurely, or they knew it could happen, but they just didn't really think that they had to put anything in place because they had told their sister that they want her to take care of their children. And turns out that we actually have to go through multiple court processes to one, probate the estate of the deceased parent, but then also to be able to appoint a conservator to handle the property on behalf of that minor child. So that's another situation of what happens when someone dies without a will. If they had minor children, the situation that bothers me the most is when I drive through neighborhoods and it used to be a thriving, beautiful neighborhood of people who had jobs that they were proud of, and they cut the grass in their of their house, and they maintained the property. They made sure that if anything went wrong, that they repaired it quickly. They kept their roof maintained, whatever they needed to do to take care of that house. And you go through these neighborhoods and you see where all these beautiful houses used to be, and now most of them are falling apart, in disrepair, not being maintained, being vandalized, all of the things you can think of. And I bet you that in most of those cases, the owners of those homes died without a will or an estate plan, any kind of trust in place. And so, what tends to happen in those cases, from my experience, you might have it where the parent dies and they have maybe 4 children. One of the children lived in the house since they were born, they never left, and they still in the house, and the parent dies. But that child perhaps didn't really learn how to maintain the home. They didn't know about paying the taxes. They didn't know about cutting the grass and keeping the house maintained, because the parent always did everything for them and they never really had to do it themselves. Well, now they got the house all to themselves, and they keep doing what they had been doing, not paying the taxes, not cutting the grass, not getting the roof fixed when it leaked. And here they are now, the house falling apart. They end up leaving because they can't live in a house that's falling apart. So they leave. And now the family is just kind of like, well, the house is there, it's falling apart, it's not worth anything. So we're just gonna let it sit until the somebody from the government decides that it's blight and they tear it down. That's a common scenario that I see. It's something that really breaks my heart. I hate seeing beautiful neighborhoods go down because the people who owned those homes and took care of them, maintained them, loved on them, raised their families there, didn't have a will or trust in place. And so when they died, there was no clear plan about what should happen to their property after they died. So these are some of the like real things that happen when people die without a will. Yes, legally, if you die without a will, then someone has to probate your estate, and they have to go to the court and ask the court to appoint an administrator, and the administrator is going to look the state law to see who owns the property. But that's assuming that people are actually going to take the legal steps after the person died. A lot of times we have situations where no one does take the legal steps. And I was just talking about a house, like what happens when someone owns a house and they die without a will. But there are other situations that people die with property. It might be bank accounts. You have situations where someone has died and they have money in a bank account, and their family needs to figure out, how do we get the money out of the bank account? Who's going to be in charge of getting the money out of the account? What steps do we take? Who gets the money? Is it all the children, or should it only be one child or a particular children? Not having a will or trust in place, all of that is just up to the family to figure out. State law is going to kick in again and just say, well, who are the heirs at law? Oh, they had a surviving spouse, they had children, so let's just split the money up that way. Instead of really, the court's not going to look at, well, who actually should be entitled to that money. Because that's something that the person who had the account was supposed to decide by having a will or trust in place. And when they don't do that, then everything's up to state law. So when someone dies without a will, they die without a trust or any kind of estate planning, state law is going to kick in and decide what happens to their property. And state law is going to kick in to say who's going to be in charge of their property. And nobody, this is not something that the person who once owned that property gets to decide. That stuff is going to be decided for them. And a lot of times families fight over it. There's a lot of family disagreements because of what someone didn't have in place. There's a lot of confusion. A lot of times there's hurdles that come up because someone has died without a will or a trust. Or families end up losing a property. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard about families where maybe the house went into foreclosure because the family was not able to communicate with the mortgage lender because they wouldn't talk with the family until someone actually probated the estate. A lot of these things can be kind of avoided where even if someone dies without a will, the family can still go to probate court and get an administrator appointed. But a lot of people just don't even know that. Like, there's just so much property that people are losing because they didn't even like know the law. They didn't even know what options were available. And I see we have a comment here. It said that happened with my father-in-law. He was in the military. It's my cousin, y'all. Hey, cuz. This happened with my father-in-law. He was in the military. His last will was when he had gone overseas, and there was some other mess with that, though, with the siblings. Oh, okay. My ex became the executor of the state. He was a mess. Went through several attorneys, sold the house and his Corvette. Yeah, like wills that people created and their life is so different now. But that's the last will that they had. So that's the will that has to be probated. The will that if they had a will legally, you have to probate it. You might not like what's in the will. You may not think that it's the way that your family member would have done it if they were in their right mind. But like in this case, it was the last will that he had before he went overseas. He was in the military. The military will help you get a will, especially if you're about to go overseas or go into combat, things like that. But a lot of people who are actually in a position where they're in the military, going and doing that kind of stuff, they're like in a totally different phase of life than they're going to be at the end of their life when they're receiving VA benefits and they already, maybe been married once or twice and got grown kids and all that. Life is just so different than it would have been for that young person in the military. And so it's important. With that, thank you so much for that perspective because we have to update our estate planning as we go. We don't want to just have an estate plan that we put in place and we think, well, I did my will. Look at your life back then. Look at your life 20 years ago. I know for me, 20 years ago, I was like very, very young, younger than I am now. I'm not going to tell you how old I was or am, but I was very young and my life was very different. I was not married. I did not have children. I did not have a law firm. I did not have so many things. And the will that I would have created 20 years ago is so different from the will that I need now. And it's going to be different from the will that I have when my kids are grown. It's just how it is. And actually, you know, having a trust can be something we consider as well. Yeah, the military makes you get a will. Yeah, so y'all, that's a good point. If you were in the military, if you served in the military, first, thank you for your service. We had Veterans Day a couple of days ago. Thank you for your service. But make sure that you go get a will that is appropriate for your stage in life. And to be honest, it may not be the military attorney who's going to be the best person to do your will because they have a very specific purpose in getting those wills done. They're trying to make sure that if something happened to you while you're serving, that your family has you have some kind of plan, some way to know where those benefits go. But when you are out and you're in the civilian world and doing things differently, you need to have a plan that's adaptable for where you are in life at that time. So very, very different situations call for different kinds of planning strategies. So, I'm glad y'all are here. If anybody else had any questions or comments, be glad to respond to those things. But um I want to be one of those people who makes getting a will or getting a trust like more commonplace. We go and we get a house. This is something I got to talk to more of my realtor friends about this. But when they sell houses to people, I want to make sure that they make sure those folks get a will in place. Like, you don't want to go and buy a house. You got your young family and something happened to you, and now your 2-year-old inheriting your house. We don't want to do that because your 2-year-old don't know how to pay a mortgage and your 2-year-old don't know how to do anything related to the house. And of course, I know it's gonna be an adult taking care of them. But wouldn't you hate for you to have bought a house and your child got a nice place to live? They're 2 years old, but they had a nice place to live, and they end up with a situation where the person who's their guardian now, or taking care of them, can't access that house for whatever reason. And I could go into all the various potential reasons why that might happen, but let's say they were in that situation where there's no clear way for the guardian of your child to access your house, or maybe there is a way for them to access it, but you didn't give them a plan for how to pay for it, and it's a little bit outside of their budget. That beautiful house that you got for your child in some cases could be lost if you don't have good planning in place. So let's make sure that we take care of those things. It's a lot. Yeah, we don't think about getting a will. We need to get those, just like insurance. Yes, yes. And even with getting insurance, a lot of times people will say people get insurance all the time, and they get these big policies, and they'll put their children as the beneficiary. Y'all know a child cannot inherit property. Again, just like this 2-year-old with the house, your 15-year-old is not going to know what to do with $1 million policy. And the law is not going to let them hold on to it. So what they're going to do is the court's going to have to appoint a conservator who is going to be legally responsible for managing that money or whatever property that child inherits on behalf of the child. And what happens with that is they have to report to the court every year. This is how much money I have. This is how I spent the money. This is how I used the money. Whatever it is that you've done, you have to report it and document it. And then there are some situations where you won't be able to access the money for that minor child unless you go through a court process. And I said this in a video I just did recently, where you could have, like, let's say you got two parents and you're the mother, you left a policy for your child, and the mother passes, and so now the father has the child, but he won't be able to manage that money that came out of that insurance policy on behalf of the child unless there was some kind of legal framework set up. So what we typically would do is, if you have a will or a trust, we would have you to create we have you leave your child's portion of the property or your estate to them. You'll leave it to them in a trust so that they have an adult who's going to be responsible for the money on their behalf. Or you can leave it to a custodian who would be responsible for the money. And there's different rules for each one. And so what they'll do is make sure that the child gets what they need, but they can do it without that court supervision, which is necessary if there was no trust or there was no custodian account. So things like that, we really have to just think about. I have a life insurance policy, and then if I just leave my minor children, there's going to have to be someone appointed by a court to be able to manage that money, unless I've created some kind of custodial account or trust account for that child. And when I say trust account, I really mean not a trust account, but a trust to leave that money to for that child. Oh yeah, you also do have to update your wills and estate planning after major life changes like a divorce, or if you have a beneficiary you name in your plan that you need to that someone has died, or maybe they're no longer able to manage property for themselves. You got to really think about that. Like, you may have left something to a sister, and then now that sister has a disability and they're not able to manage that money for themselves, or maybe somebody fell into a lot of debt and you think, okay, I don't need to leave them anything directly. I need to leave it to them in a trust or something like that. There are different things that you can do, but you really need to talk to an estate planning attorney to help you figure out, like, what do I need to do in this kind of situation to make sure that my family's taken care of. So yeah, I mean, y'all got any other questions or any comments? I thank you so much to my cousin for for all this engagement and making me be on my toes, because you're right, like, all of these things are things that we kind of like take for granted, but life is life all the time. Like, we all can think of something going on right now that happened unexpectedly, and a little planning can go a long way, especially for things that we know are possibilities. We don't want to think about bad things happening. And I tell you, let's create this plan, and we don't hope that you have to use it anytime soon. But if you got children, you got responsibilities, you got a beautiful house that you love to take care of, you want to make sure you have a plan in place so that that stuff can be preserved, or that it goes to the people that you care about, and it's not just something that's gone, is wasted. Or, if you care about your neighborhood, make sure that you have a plan in place. Leave your house to someone in your family who's either going to sell it to somebody else who's going to love that house as their own. Well, it is their own because they bought it, but I'm just saying, like, someone who's going to love it just like the previous owner loved it. Or that you leave it to someone who's going to live there and take care of it, or maybe rent it out to a family who's going to take care of it, whatever it is. um, Make sure you have a plan in place for that stuff. So I'm gonna leave it there and drink me some water. Got my pretty bottle here. Drink me some water. I hope y'all have a good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. And y'all take care. Please like this video, subscribe, share it with a friend, and let's talk some more in the comments. Let us know, like, what are those sad stories you heard, the scary stories you heard, the funny stories, maybe some funny stuff. We got funny stuff that comes out of these things. But y'all have a great night, and thank you so much for tuning in. Take care. If I can find out how to end this thing.